before we come into this life, we sit down with superconscious aspects of ourselves to determine what is the optimum incarnation as our gift to the source.
Pre-birth planning.
I love the way you say it's our gift.
Yeah.
That's a really great way to frame it.
That's what I mean. Well, that's our contribution.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's why we were so giddy to come. You know, we get to give this to, you know, this is our contribution to the creation.
Sheer expression of the divine.
Right.
Exploring the human journey.
David Alexander English is a visionary that describes himself as an artist, poet, photographer, astrologer, writer, filmmaker, producer, world traveler, designer, creative genius, Imagineer, and so much more. He received a bachelor's degree in social theory in 1979 and began his writing. In the 1980s, he began to paint, and by the mid-1990s, he was studying and painting sacred geometry. Here are some examples of the sacred geometry paintings at light speed, 1,000 original images from the collected works of this contemporary artist. His writing is inspired by spiritual technology he awakened to when he had his spiritual emergence. You can find his books on Amazon and look into the vastness of the universe and the complexity and simple truths that he has discovered. If you've ever been to Venice Beach, California, you may have ran into this visionary while live painting, doing performance art, storytelling, and all sorts of random weirdness from the edge of Western civilization. David enjoys his life on the beach and lives in a Volkswagen bus. His somewhat nomadic lifestyle has led him to many fascinating experiences all around the world. We met up with David in Los Angeles at the Conscious Life Expo, and we had this incredible conversation. Hi and welcome. I'm so glad you joined us. Gail and I are at the Conscious Life Expo in Los Angeles, and while we were here, we got to meet the one and only David Alexander English, an author, a composer, an artist, an all-around fascinating individual. Thanks for being here, man.
Thanks for having me.
So as we are looking into consciousness, looking into this whole thing as this spiritual being having human experience, I get to find out a little bit about you. I've seen your web presence. I've seen that you're into emergence. You're into consciousness. You've got fiction, nonfiction. You've got artwork. Tell me a little bit about what this soul journey that you are on is doing for you.
I first came to consciousness around 4.
Around 4?
Yeah, where I was continuously conscious. And
like you were aware that you were aware.
Exactly, exactly. And I knew that there was more going on.
Oh my God.
You know, and
that seems really early to me.
I don't think it is. I don't think I was here yet until then.
Yeah.
And then...
So you're just a walking around meat suit, and then, boom, you came in at 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, you know, because people told me that things happened, and I did this and that and the other thing, and I had no connection to it at all. But then I did. And I knew I was on Earth, and what I was doing, and all this sort of stuff. And I had a very intense dream, you know, sleeping time. You know, I could see things. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and I would see energy. I'd see entities. I'd see all sorts of things. And it was very intense, you know. So fast forward through the years, I really felt like, you know, I remember being like 5 and 6 years old, being so excited about growing up so that I could, and being on Earth for as long as I possibly could, so that I could experience being ever more conscious, seeing just how conscious I could be. at 5 and 6 years old. That was my just being so excited about the possibility of just seeing how conscious I could be. You know, like playing this great game.
Yeah, so you were
Yeah.
you are a participant in the game even at a young age.
Yeah.
Wow.
So then, I started, formally meditating, gravitating toward things like meditation and whatever expanded consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And the music that I chose to listen to, the books I read and everything, they were all about, that fulfilling that urge, right?
So did you have parents that were very conscious that encouraged that, or were you like, we don't know what to do with this child?
No, my mother was tremendously supportive in just about everything I did, and she was one of those people that's very intuitive about, what does that plant need to grow, right? And let's place what is that plant doing? Okay, so let's place this in there and see, if the plant, if that's the food that it needs. So like if I showed an interest in something, next month there'd be a magazine in the mail about that thing. So I was really into the space program, and all of a sudden these magazines started to come into the house about the space program,
and so your mom would do that.
Oh yeah,
so
yeah.
Whatever to support you.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
When I played football, I was on this undefeated football team, and she was the team mascot because her car was right behind, when we were doing away games, her car was right behind the bus, and if she wasn't there, people started to feel nervous, but they would like, where's your mother, and
she was team mom.
Exactly.
She's the good luck charm.
You know what I mean? She was all there, all in. My dad was a strict disciplinarian, and he was very, but he was in the Air Force, right? And so,
of course,
so he spent a lot of time, out and about, and
a lot of yes sir, no sir, yeah,
right. And but because I grew up outside of an Air Force base, I wanted to be a fighter pilot and an astronaut when I grew up, and so I was around I remember being 5 years old, and my father took me to work. He worked on fighter aircraft, and so I was in there, in a little uniform just like his.
Oh, cool.
And with these big jets and everything on the flight line, and that that was it. I was in it. Well, at 13, I was in Civil Air Patrol. I got to see Apollo 14 launch from the pad 4 miles away, and that was the peak. My eyesight, back then you needed 20/20 eyesight, and I didn't have it. It started to degrade at around 15, 16 years old. So that dream went out the window. 10 or 15 years ago, I realized that I had kind of fulfilled the dream. Not the fighter pilot thing. The thing about being a fighter pilot was fellowship, of being in the company of people that you admire, and that fellowship, that brotherhood, and you can do that, working at putting out a fire, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
camaraderie and teamwork.
The astronaut part was about being able to go to distant places and represent the best of who we are, whoever we are.
Because your soul's already that traveling thing. Yeah.
See what is there, be an ambassador, and bring back that information and share it with us, right?
Yeah.
And about 20 years ago, 15 years ago, I realized that that's exactly what I do. That's exactly what I'm doing here.
Yep.
I go into the unknown, and I discover something or realize something, and I do my best to articulate that.
Yeah.
to as many and disseminate that to as many people as I can. Total Virgo.
Yeah.
It's all. I'm an astrologer too. In the winter of 1993-94, I had a spiritual acceleration where I was in a state of bliss 24 hours a day for nearly 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say a spiritual acceleration, what I mean is I literally felt my spirit like I hit the pedal to the metal. And this acceleration. I after the first month, I called my mother. I wasn't into Christianity or religion or anything like that. Never have been. But I spoke to her about using words that most people understand. God and goddess and things like that. And I spoke to her about articulating what my experience was. This awakening, this acceleration. And she said, "You sound like you've come so far, just in a month."
Yeah.
I was
Wow.
like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And as an astrologer, I know that there are certain things that happen at that time astrologically for me personally.
Mm-hmm. So what was that? Like, what was it in your chart, or what was the timing of it?
Okay, so my ascendant is 21 degrees Capricorn. Neptune and Uranus were conjunct at 21 degrees Capricorn, crossing my ascendant.
Uh-huh.
Neptune, the planet of spirituality, Uranus, the planet of consciousness. And the ascendant being the point in the chart that represents your incarnational aspiration, or the archetype you're aspiring to through this incarnation, right? And so, boom. Right?
It was time.
I went where I was when that happened. I was about 100 miles east of here in the Ansberego Desert. I went out there with a bag of rice and a roll of canvas to have a conversation with the universe. And, within the first 3 to 5 days, I started to experience that sense of euphoria. And it didn't stop, right? And when you're in the desert, you can hear the divine vibration, what I call the divine vibration.
Uh-huh.
It's the ever-present sound, that high-pitched hum-hiss sound. Some people call it tinnitus, but it's the vibration by which all things are manifest.
I need to get a little bit more clarity on that, because sometimes I hear this.
Yeah, that's it.
That's what it is?
That's it.
Oh my God, because I feel like there's a meaning behind it, but I never know what that is.
Brother, it's just infinite consciousness. That's all.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's all.
Doesn't that make you feel better?
It's just the source of the universe, right?
Because when you talk about how you weren't influenced religiously, I was. My soul came in here to be this strict fundamentalist Christian. There's only one way to get to heaven, and if you miss it, you go to hell for eternity. And so that was I'm like, oh, that's all it is. And so this is part of my deconstruction. And I hear your story. I'm fascinated. I'm like, really?
Yeah,
Tell me
there's
more.
so many things that we're still putting pieces together.
Right.
So,
Right.
that. That's a piece.
It's interesting that this concept of heaven. On the way over here, I'm doing this app, right? And one of the things in the app is called Daily. It's the letters of my name are DAE, right? And so it's daily, right?
So good, yeah.
Yeah, but it's also a daily app.
Mm-hmm.
It's a daily mindfulness Master Almanac daily oracle, right? And so I've self-published 28 books in the past 10 years.
Awesome.
15 books since 2015. 8 books in the last year.
God.
Fiction, nonfiction, fiction, nonfiction.
Wow, that is robust.
I know. You know why I did it? Because I wanted to impress you.
Of course. Of course you did.
All right. I live in a Volkswagen bus and have for the past 10 years.
Awesome.
And I wanted to impress us with what we are all capable of. So if I can do all of that living on a Volkswagen bus for 10 years, y'all got no excuse for not, walking your idea into reality. Okay? So I published this Master Almanac for 4 years, right? And the Master Almanac came about from initially studying the Mayan calendar and the dream spell calendar, right? So I thought the dream spell calendar was the real Mayan calendar, when I first, came upon it in 1995. And I did a time experiment where I had 2 different versions of it, and I monitored them for 6 months. And I didn't know it at the time, but they were both the Dream Spell calendar, which is Jose Arguez's version of the Mayan calendar.
Okay.
Right?
I
The
have
real
never
Mayan calendar.
heard of you said the Dream
It's called Dream Spell.
Spell. I've never
Right.
heard of that.
If you've heard of the Mayan calendar,
Yeah,
what
yeah.
you've probably heard of is this,
The
the
Dream
Dream
Spell.
Spell
Okay.
calendar,
Okay.
Jose Arguez's popularization based on his book, The Mayan Factor.
Mm-hmm.
And so I read his book in 1995, summer 1995. I read it in 3 days, and I had to give it back to the person who owned it.
Yeah.
You borrowed
And
it.
so I had to read it
Give it
really
back.
quick. All right. So I was in this, where Woodstock happened?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so every year they have a Woodstock reunion in that same place.
Yeah, they
with
do.
Yazgid's farm. So I was there, and the guy that was parked next to me had the book.
Okay.
And so I
You
borrowed
had to
the book
read
and I
it.
had to read it to give it
Yeah,
back to
thank
him.
you,
So I read
universe.
it in 3 days, and then I drew out an example of the calendar, and then but there was something where I wasn't quite sure which way to go, so I made 2 versions, right? And those were the 2 versions that I monitored for 6 months until February 29th, 1996. According to Jose Arguez, you don't count that day. And I'm like, what? You've spent all this energy into, charting the minutia of time, space, and all this other stuff, and all of a sudden, for one day, you're going to pretend like that day doesn't exist because it doesn't fit into your calendar? That doesn't make any sense at all. But in the interest of the experiment, I made another calendar that did exactly what he said. And I monitored all 3 for the next 4 months. And what I discovered
Yeah.
is that they were all valid. And what that told me was that the common denominator between them all is belief.
Mm-hmm.
And what what
believe.
intention we invest in that
that's incredible.
system, right? And it responds because it's all
It's
all consciousness,
Yeah.
right?
What we believe becomes real.
right? And so
Nicely
time, time is what we make of it,
Yeah, it is.
right? But I also wanted to know what the real Mayan calendar was and what the difference was. And so that was the conception of the Master Almanac. So I was like, well, what if you just put all the friggin' calendars that we have, what if you put them all right next to one another and you could look at them and see? So that was the genesis of the Master Almanac. And I published it from 2009 to 2012. It was purely a labor of love and a lot of work.
Yeah.
So it turned out to be 18 calendars from the world's traditions, all in one book.
Now,
And
is this a predictive calendar, or is it? What's the purpose
This-
of it?
there's 18 different calendars.
Yeah.
Which one do you mean?
Well, is it
Okay.
is
so-
it giving time a presence for a future event, or is it just showing passage of time?
Well, once again, it's all about what you invest in it, right?
Okay.
My job was just to present the calendars and to see, as an experiment, to see what we all could see there,
Mhm.
right? What I ended up doing, 4 of those calendars were speculative calendars.
Mhm.
I would consider Jose Arguez's calendar a speculative calendar because he just basically made it up. It's a brilliant thing,
Mm.
but he made it up. And I will tell you that I made up 4 of these calendars,
Mhm.
right? Because for different reasons, that like one of them was based on, I call it the I Ching Lunar Oracle Calendar, and it's based on Terence McKenna's in his book, The Hidden Landscape. There's a brief passage where he talks about how he had a revelation that the I Ching was a lunar calendar. the I Ching is, the book of changes, right? It's all about the study of change, right, and transition. But he took it a little further. He was like, what he was interested in was the incidence of novelty, right? Newness, invention, innovation, right? And so what he did is he looked at all of human history and the incidence of invention and innovation throughout human history. He charted it out. And according to this passage, he talks about how the I Ching is a permutation that measures the incidence of novelty in human history. And it is predictive. Because what he said is, this calendar will end on the last, all right, so there's 64 hexagrams, there's 6 lines in each hexagram, and each line is called a yao, right? And each yao is a day in the calendar. And the last yao will be, he said it would be on December 21st, 2012 at 12:07. I'm like, I don't know how we got the 1207 part.
Right.
I don't know how we knew any of that. But for years, it percolated.
Yeah.
Right? I'm like, how is this?
And this is 96. You're discovering this.
Yeah. When I read the Mayan Factor and then did that time experiment, and I read this thing about because I think Jose mentions, because in the middle of in the Mayan Factor he talks. There's a permutation of his calendar that has the I Ching in the center 64 squares of the 260 permutation of the what's known as the Solkin, right? Wow. The Mayan calendar.
Way out of my pay grade at this
point.
Man.
No visual aids, folks.
And you haven't even been through Y2K at this point in time either. So the ending of 99 to 2000. So
yeah,
I just remember the panic of that, plus the panic of 2012, which is still years down the road.
I was at the pyramids for the millennium.
Oh, that's so good.
How I ended up there was I was in Maui, living on a nude beach. I had a copy of Graham Hancock's book, Fingerprints of the Gods, that somebody had given me because I did a reading for them, and they were like, "Have you read this Fingerprints of the Gods?" I was like, "No." And they said, "I'm going to bring it to you." I was like, "Right." People say things like that all the time. But the next day, I was in the middle of a reading with somebody else, and they came along and they gave me this book. And now that book is friggin' huge, and I was backpacking, so I wanted to read it as fast as I could. So that I could give it to somebody else to carry, you know what I'm saying? So I went to Maui to this nude beach, and I plowed through the book, and then a week later, I felt this sudden urge to build a pyramid out of sand on the beach. The next day, I woke up and walked down to the water, and I'm taken in the morning and everything like that, and I built another one, Next thing I know, I'm building the whole pyramid complex and everything. By the end of around noon, I'm almost done with it. And this gentleman walks up and he goes, he's wearing an amulet, right? And his amulet is the eye in the pyramid. It's made out of Fimo, right? And he's talking to me about pyramids and everything like that. And it turns out he's talking to me about some show that was on television about the pyramids being the belt of Orion, right? And that was on television the night before, apparently. And I'm living on the beach. I have no idea.
Right.
So he thought that the reason I was doing this was because of the show that he had seen the night before, right?
Egotistical, but yeah.
But that's the premise. That's one of the main premises of Fingerprints of the Gods, is that the belt of Orion is the pyramids of Giza.
Now, did you know that before?
I read the book.
Oh, because you read the book.
Right.
Gotcha.
Exactly.
Okay.
So he goes away, and the next day, same thing. I get up in the morning, I go out, and beautiful ocean and everything, and I'm like, oh man, I really feel like building a pyramid. So I built another pyramid, and about noontime, I'm almost done, and another guy shows up, and he's got an amulet, right?
Whoa!
Now this amulet, it's about like that big, right? And it looks like a stylized leaf made out of jade, we're talking about life, the universe, and everything. And it turns out that this amulet that he's wearing, he bought at auction when he was working for the renovation of the Seattle Museum of Art. They were selling their Egyptian collection to buy more art. And they were auctioning it off.
They're
And
selling artifacts?
Yeah, they sold off their
God.
collection. Or they auctioned it off
Yeah.
to raise money to buy more art.
Incredible.
And the piece is called The Eye of God. The story behind this piece is, you know the Pharaoh that adopted Moses?
Yeah.
This piece was in his mummification. He was buried with this in his
Oh.
mummification. Right?
Oh.
And
So this, like, the actual thing the guy has is supposed to be the actual thing?
oh, it is.
Oh my God.
He had it in a safety deposit box for 10 years.
Wow.
And then one day it was like, he was like, I wonder what it does. So he got it out and he put it on. I said, so? What does it do? And he's like, I can tell what people's intentions are.
Oh.
Wow.
And I was like, that makes sense. If you're the Pharaoh, you'd want to know what people's intentions are,
Yeah.
right?
Should I drink this drink or not?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And, he gave me kind of a reading of what my intentions were and all this kind of stuff. And
How accurate was he at the time?
well, he just said, you're a good soul and la, 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 you're on
Of
your
course.
path and la, 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 and, so, but right out, I finished the pyramid, we say goodbye. And I'm just, as I'm finishing it, something says, go to the pyramids for the millennium. Now, this is February of 1999.
Oh.
Okay, I have $30 in my pocket and I'm living on a nude beach on Maui. Okay?
With no pockets in your nude
Exactly, exactly. And so I walk up to my hammock, and out of the blue, somebody on the beach says, "Hey, David, where are you going to be for the millennium?"
No.
I'm like, I think I'm going to the pyramids. And somebody else says, "Oh, I heard that there's going to be some big concert there where the Pink Floyd is going to play there." And somebody else says, "Oh, I heard that George Bush was going to be there doing some Masonic ritual or something."
Wow.
And I was like, good to know, good to know. Over the next 10 months, I made my way across the world to be at the pyramids. Now, my focus was around that same time when I was doing started building the pyramids on the beach. I started doing a series of 4 meditations every day. One of which included 180 conscious breaths, right? And the whole thing would kind of culminate with me standing on my head and all this sort of stuff, doing this little thing that I've been doing since I started standing on my head when I was going through the spiritual acceleration. The main thing that I was doing when I was out in the desert was just listening and being, and all this information would come. And I would find myself standing there, having stood there for like 10 or 20 minutes with all this just like feast of information coming.
Yeah.
And just feeling euphoric, just feeling this, like you're at the feast. One of the things that the universe taught me at the time was this thing that I called the Divine Communion meditation, right? Which is a breath meditation where you're listening to the divine vibration and you're picturing your breath going from your root chakra up to the crown with the inhale and then down the front of your chakras with the exhale.
Yeah.
Right? And you just keep doing that
So
while you're
clear.
listening to the divine vibration, recognizing that it's infinite consciousness, that it's infinite love.
Yeah.
Right? And you're invoking, inviting, and welcoming it in to the deepest aspect of your being. Right? With glee.
With glee.
Right? Because when you're in glee, you have no reservation. Right? And you're beyond gratitude.
Yeah.
You're just, scintillated by the communion.
Yeah.
You're communing with the source of all that is
So good.
at will, anywhere, anytime, because you can, and it's your choice.
Yeah.
Does it get any better?
So good.
Yeah. So I'm walking around in bliss,
Yeah.
feeling that and practicing that as much as I possibly can. And it just carried me, right? In the middle of all that bliss, something said, you should probably do some kind of physical practice while you're going to do
like
this.
a yoga type.
Something like that. And I was like, well, I've always wanted to stand on my head, but I've never tried it, because I was afraid I was going to fall over. Yeah, so you fall over, and so what? You just fall over, right? So I tried it, and I was able to stand on my head, and it evolved over the years into this whole, all sorts of elaborate moves and whatnot, And a couple of years ago, I found out that, when people see me do it, they think it's yoga.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm like, okay, yoga means union or communion. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. And so the key, though, is to do what you can to, while you're doing whatever you're doing, to maintain communion, maintain that connection. And the key to that is the listening to the divine vibration, recognizing it for what it is, right?
Yeah, so you're tapping in. You're
right
there.
It's your choice.
Yeah.
It's your choice.
We took yoga teacher training, and we learned that Iyengar was a guy that would, as a yoga practitioner, he would stand on his head for a long period of time, an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours. What time periods do you use for your physical practice?
Time period?
Yeah,
How long do you stand
stand on
on
your
your
head? You just let it go, don't you?
Yeah, man.
You just let it go.
It's not about the time. It's about, what's appropriate to, it's about being in communion because it's what you feel like.
I just have this image of you on the beach, fully nude, standing upside down on your head.
You got it.
Click. There it is.
There's the image.
There you have it. There it is. Yeah. It could be shocking.
With your journey through consciousness, you're putting together a calendar. You're seeing all the synchronicities in calendars, whether they were predictive or giving presence to something. What were you finding with that
experiment?
And that experiment. And what did it lead up to with your 2012? What was that revelation?
So, all right. So, on the way to the pyramids, on the autumnal equinox, I was on top of Silbury Hill. That may not mean much to you because you know what Silbury Hill is. Okay, so the night before the equinox, I had been camping on top of Glastonbury Tor for about a week. Glastonbury Tor is like a three-dimensional Cretan labyrinth hill in.
Oh wow!
It's like the nipple on the breast in the middle of this huge landscape in England, southern England. And we met a woman there, and we invited her to spend the night there with us. My friend and I were camped up there. And she spent the night, and unfortunately it rained that night. So it was really cold, but the three of us are like, and the reason we're up there is because it just feels really good. And it's one of those places, universe, whoever's listening, if you ever get a chance to go up to the top of Glastonbury Tor, seize the day, because it's the energy there. I've been to a lot of power spots all over the planet, and that is definitely one of my most favorite places.
That's awesome.
I've probably spent 2 weeks on, living on top of that, just because I just couldn't leave.
The closest we've been is that Sedona vibe with the red rocks.
So you know what I'm talking about.
It feels nice.
You just don't want to leave. It's you're just in a sweet spot. Right. And the first time I went there, which was like about 8 years before, I felt like I was sitting on top of the Tor. I felt like I was riding the planet.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah, I just said it out loud. It feels like we're just riding the planet,
We are a rock in outer space. It's not just floating around, right? You are. You literally are.
Yeah. So the next morning, this woman she said, I'm planning to go to Avebury Stone Circle and Stonehenge today. Would you like to come?
Yeah.
if we're coming, are you coming back here? She said, oh yeah, we'll be back by nightfall. I was like, I'm there, you know?
Wow, that's
Yeah.
incredible.
So we went to her. She had a bed and breakfast. We went and took a hot shower and put on some dry clothes and everything, and got in a car, her rental, and that's how we spent the day. At noon, we were on top of, as I said, Silbury Hill, and Silbury Hill is like imagine a pyramid that's just a cone. It's a man-made structure that's, it's overgrown with grass and everything like that. And what's really bizarre about this spot is it's at the base of a hill. 4,000 years ago, people thought it was important to build a hill next to a hill. And it just so happens that this place where this Silbury Hill is built is one of the places where a whole lot of crop circles
Oh yeah.
seem to be
yeah.
appearing.
Oh yeah.
And right across the street is another magnificent place called West Kennet Long Barrow. On the other side of the hill from Silbury Hill is the largest stone circle in the world, which is the Avebury Stone Circle. And it's raining again because it's southern England.
Yeah, it's southern England.
And we climb up to the top of Silbury Hill, and we get up there with the two women and myself, and this gentleman comes walking up, and his name is Rory McQuestion. And he and I start talking like we had just finished a paragraph. And we're just talking about all this stuff. He's the one that told me about, this whole thing about the random number generators and this whole experiment where they have all these random number generators around the world, and they're not networked or anything like that.
Yeah.
But they started there are certain moments.
It's a consciousness thing.
Yeah.
Right,
And we feel the
where
energy.
there's some sort of resonance where they all start generating the same sequences of numbers, and those are correlated to key events in human, social histories.
Yeah. I think it's the Heart Math Institute that
That's
does
right.
that.
That's right. That's right. And so at the time, this is 1999, the most significant event up to that point was the O.J. Simpson trial verdict.
It was.
Okay?
It was, yeah.
But
White Bronco.
since then, the weekend of 9/11, so it started showing up. It started showing up on 9/9/2001. Where that's when the whole thing started. You know? And if you've talked to people about a lot of anecdotal evidence of people having dreams and visions and stuff coming to them on that Saturday before the Monday. And so he mentioned this. He told me the whole O.J. Simpson thing. Now, I'm probably one of the only people in America that didn't know anything about the O.J. Simpson trial while it was happening.
Really?
I had no friggin' idea.
No TV.
The whole
right?
thing was, I was living off the grid in the bush. I spent more times at hot springs and rainbow gatherings and all this than I did in civilization during that time. And I had no idea that it even happened. And so one day, I overheard some people talking about O.J. Simpson, and I'm like, the juice? What are you talking about, man?
He's a great guy.
I had no idea. I missed all of it.
That's awesome.
I would have made a great juror because I had no idea.
You would have been juror number one.
So, saying all that to say that when Rory told me this whole story about, the heart math, I was like, it'd be really amazing if you could use that principle to create something yummy. And I just, came up with this idea called Conscious Evolution Day, right? So imagine if there was like a global meditation where, let's say wherever you are at sunset on a specific day, let's say New Year's or the winter solstice or the summer solstice, or let's do all of them. What the heck, right? Equinoxes. Take 15 minutes close your eyes, listen to the divine vibration, and focus on having already received. Imagine the world that you would want to see.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if there's people that you want to see healthy, imagine seeing them healthy and happy and whole, right? If there's, things you want to see, envision for the world, the directions you want to see the world go, imagine what that would look like, right? Just focus on yumminess, right? As the sun as the sunset moved around the world, you would create a wave.
So good.
Of conscious evolution.
Conscious evolution.
Right?
As it moves.
Right.
Because you're choosing to consciously evolve.
Right.
Right? By giving the universe your undivided attention. Every time you're
Right.
choosing conscious evolution. Every time you give the universe your undivided attention,
Yes.
you're choosing conscious evolution.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's no going back. It's not like you step down from that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that was kind of like the genesis of that moved towards the Master Almanac.
Mm-hmm.
And so in 2008, I started putting it together. Because at that point I was like, well, it's 4 years till 2012. Let's start, building this wave of energy towards that 2012 end date, because nobody knew what was going to happen with that, And it's not like we're going to hurt something.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Or just making it all up,
Just making
right?
it up.
So let's paint it the way you want to paint it, right? And I got to tell you, it was tremendously gratifying to finally see all these different calendars next to one another. So, I have the sacred geometry, I paint sacred geometry, a lot of sacred geometry stuff. And I developed a deck of cards, a divination deck, of my sacred geometry paintings. So sacred geometry paintings are a trademarked intellectual property, thanks to a licensing agent contract that I had for 5 years back a ways. It's one of the only things that came out of that was it got a trademark.
Nice.
So anytime I paint a sacred geometry painting, it's part of that. It's already trademarked.
Yeah.
But in 2008, I developed, as part of that contract, I developed this whole the sacred geometry paintings, daily oracle, and meditation kit. And we submitted that around to all these different publishers like Perseus Books and Macmillan and everything. Nobody bit, but they all looked at it, and they asked to see it. That's why we made it. But they didn't buy it. They ended up buying it. But in the process, I developed, the 366 card deck. Ascribed each card to a day, right? And I was like, well, it's got to have a companion book. So I made a companion book, and I was like, how am I gonna? Needs to be a table of contents. How am I gonna organize the table of contents? And it turned out the best way to do that was to do them 7 days, right? Just like, and so the next day, as I started to work on that project, I saw this word in my research, perpetual calendar. I was like, what's a perpetual calendar? I researched a perpetual calendar, Googled it, and I realized that I just created a perpetual calendar the day before with the cards, that they were a perpetual calendar.
Okay.
Right? There's that. the Sacred Geometry Paintings Daily Oracle calendar.
Yeah.
And now you've made it into an app.
So on New Year's, Christmas and New Year's this year, I fasted and I went on what I call a shamanic journey. I just went out on the beach and walked and listened and took copious notes from the universe, right? Went in total brainstorm mode. Whatever the universe needed me to know, I'm here, you have me, let's go to town.
Can you say whether or not you were using psychedelics at the time?
I was definitely not using psychedelics.
Okay. Well, we just came from the psychedelic conference a couple weekends ago, so we're like, tell us more, in the research on that. So.
Right. Once you go on a shamanic journey, it doesn't end.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of your life is shaped by that choice to into the realm of the shaman, right? Now, this gets back to what you mentioned earlier, something about heaven, right? So that there's only one way to go to heaven and all this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, the narrative of we have to get out of here to get somewhere else.
Right.
Yeah.
Heaven is a generic term to describe everywhere else but here. That's yummy, right? And yumminess is determined by the degrees of density. A couple of years ago, a friend of mine was dying of cancer, and I started to study astral projection. And when you study astral projection, you have to, at some point, you're going to learn about the basic structure of the universe. All that stuff started coming to me and being presented to me and everything. Everything from Robert Monroe's work to the best book on the subject that by far that I would recommend to anyone is called Demystifying the Out-of-Body Experience by a brother named Luis Monero. He used to have a booth at this event for a number of years. And it's a textbook that they developed for their consciousness, International Conscious Academy. The textbook they'd been using, they'd been founded by a Brazilian psychiatrist back in the 60s. So it was in Portuguese. That was their textbook. He wrote this book in English. And it's 7 chapters. The 4th chapter is the how-to. And the 5th, 6th, and 7th talks about the structure of the universe.
Cool.
Wow.
It's friggin' fascinating. And so after reading and studying for a few short months, I began to realize, first and foremost, we all come from the ultimate reality, right? This is our spacesuit. This is our spaceship, right? And as an astrologer, I tell people that I know that we all choose the moment to be born. We contract with all the key players in our life to construct a healing as our gift or giveaway to the collective human unconscious. Right? Before we come into this life, we sit down with superconscious aspects of ourselves to determine what is the optimum incarnation as our gift to the source.
Pre-birth planning.
I love the way you say it's our gift.
Yeah.
That's a really great way to frame it.
That's what I mean. Well, that's our contribution.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's why we were so giddy to come. We get to give this to, this is our contribution to the creation.
Your expression of the divine.
Right. No matter what it looks like, from the earthly perspective. Right? So we come into the realms of density. And the realms of density are determined by how dense they are or how dense they aren't, right? The least dense are the places that are closest to where we come from, which is beyond the realms of density, the ultimate reality, right? And, which is in the presence of the one, or the source of the one, right? So there are all these different terms for what these realms of density are. So the main ones in most mysticism are the causal plane, the astral plane, the etheric plane, the physical plane, and the denser realms, right? Sounds really simple when you put it that way, doesn't it?
Right.
So heaven is everything that's less dense than here.
Yeah.
Right? Most people associate heaven as essentially the etheric and astral realms. They don't know a whole lot about what's beyond. But to give you an idea, the earthly realm is to the astral realm what the astral realm is to the causal realm. So those folks on the astral realm, the causal plane is this, place in the same way, they look at that the same way that we on earth look at heaven. Right?
That's good.
Interesting. Never heard
However,
that before.
That's one way of that's one perspective, but it's all about belief, right?
Yeah.
So we're just making all this up, and it's just us out here.
It is.
Right? And we're all one, remember?
Let's do it.
There's an aspect of you on each one of those planes, at all times, and they're all right there, right? So all of those dimensional planes and all of you and all of the yous are all within you.
That's incredible.
The kingdom of God is within you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
What is above is so below.
Right. 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 It's a fractal universe.
Mm-hmm.
So when the first time I tripped was in college. Specifically, I did it with full intention because I was working as an assistant head of residence. I was about to be the assistant head of residence of a dorm at UMass Amherst, and at the time one of the biggest party schools on the planet. Working that spring before the fall when I was going to take that position, I was working with this brother who had been a student head of residence of one of the towers not far from mine. And he shared a story with me. There was this really smart kid, and somebody had slipped him a hit of acid. And he didn't know, he thought he was losing his mind. People knew that this guy was, the person who was telling me the story, loved to trip. And so they went and they got him. This kid wasn't even in his dorm, but they came and got him to come and help sit with this kid. And he was able to talk him down, help him contextualize his experience, right? Being the trip master, so to speak. And that kind of like set my mind, set me on a certain course. I was like, I am about to take on a big responsibility. There's 7 floors of 32 rooms, 32 people on a floor. And I was going to kind of be and so I wanted that experience. So that summer I called it in, and some acid showed up, and I went off and had my experience. And because I didn't want to not, I'd been pretty much a straight arrow up to that point. I didn't want to not have that skill set, And plus, I mean, it's conscious expansion, and that's what I was, So I went at it from that perspective of using it specifically for conscious expansion and to try to understand, the landscape, so to speak. Within a few months, I was kind of like the trip master of my, the people that were doing that in my dorm. We would go off on a weekend and set aside a day and start not eat anything in the morning, but some citrus and either mushrooms or acid, and just herd cats all day, basically.
Well, I ask you because we have had the experience, whether it was through an ayahuasca ceremony or a psilocybin experience, where I had the experience of feeling a deep sorrow. And I was like, oh, that Gail felt the sorrow. She's like, well, I feel really sorrowful. We need to move. Let's go over to the tree across the street. And then we went to the tree, and I just felt this deep sorrow. I was like, if consciousness is one thing.
I was feeling so sad, and I'm like, I looked over, is that you?
I was like, I think it's me. And I'm like, if consciousness is one thing, and it's just, maybe we're all just trying to experience all these things to divert us off the idea that it's just one thing, but it's really lonely. And I just felt this deep cosmic sorrow. And then it lifted into this cloud, and it said, you can explore sorrow as long as you want, because it's all part of everything. Or you can experience joy, or you can experience whatever the depth of discovery. And I went, oh, and it felt like it said to me, this is all about exploration, and you can explore anything. And so I have been in a space to have that psychedelic experience as a tool for consciousness, and I just think that's a profound shift that people need to take into account. The indigenous people on this planet have been doing this for thousands of years, and it's interesting to me how that can give you a new reframe on your 3D existence.
So it's sacred.
Yeah.
Consciousness is sacred.
Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
certainly not a recreational thing. It's certainly a sacred
It is
thing.
it's a recreational thing.
Recreational.
Ah.
I love it.
That's the whole point of it, is
Yeah.
recreation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's the people who take it
Rejuvenation.
and don't understand that's what it is.
But if they take it and they don't understand it, that's where they need to be. Okay?
It's good.
Because
Right
we're
where you're
all
at.
infinite consciousness. We all know everything there is to know.
So good.
Yeah.
The essence of human existence begins with forgetting
Mm-hmm.
that you're an infinite and immortal being,
Mm-hmm.
right?
I love that. That's like getting yourself in the hide and go seek where you suddenly can't figure out where you are, and then coming back to the wholeness.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so Christmas week 2008, I'm about to publish the Master Almanac. I'm working on my computer in the van. The computer battery needs to recharge. So I walk out to the beach, walk out to the Venice pier, take off my shoes, and I walk into the water, the waves and waves and waves and waves till they're just rolling over your toes, right? And I'm standing there, and the ocean is glass, and the sun is setting next to the pier. It's about 20 minutes before it sets. It's Christmas week, so it's kind of chilly. There's nobody on the beach, and I'm in the zone. I'm feeling really gleeful because this project that I've been dreaming about for 20 years is coming to fruition, right? And then I suddenly realize that there's all these seagulls sitting around me and preening and everything, like they're this close, like you and I, right? And I look up and down the beach, there's no seagulls anywhere else except right all around me. I'm like, at that moment I felt like I'm where I'm supposed to be. I'm part of the family, And I love seagulls. My first book that I wrote was called Love Seagulls, because they fly. I mean, I'm all about flying and whatnot, right?
So your spirit animal is the seagull, is that
No,
what you're saying?
I wouldn't say. No, I wouldn't say that. I would say that all spirit animals are my spirit animal.
Oh, you're gonna notch it up a bit, aren't you? Okay.
It's all relative, bro. We can have it any way we want. We're making it up.
We're just
remember?
making this up. I love it.
Right. So right then, the universe showed me what's up in 10 seconds. Okay, so imagine your infinite consciousness. You got that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel it.
So your infinite consciousness, you have everything because you are everything.
Yeah.
There isn't anything that isn't you. You can't forget anything because you are everything.
Yeah.
One of your most prized creations would be a place where you could experience the illusion of being separate from yourself. To the point where you would savor those things that helped you stay in that illusion for as long as possible. Because even if it was a gazillion years, that would only be an instant in your infinitude.
Yeah.
Things like fear, doubt, anger, confusion, suffering would help you stay in that illusion for as long as possible.
So good.
Okay?
Wow.
Okay. So, a week later, I'm running on the beach, and I run by that place, and the universe said one word. Ego. And I knew that what it meant was that ego was the mechanism by which the source of the universe accomplished this goal of experiencing the illusion of being separate from itself. And thus, ego has its place in the same way that, it's like an appendage. It works,
It
does what it's supposed to do. Thoughts are real things. Most of my books are about divine metaphysics. I distinguish metaphysics from divine metaphysics because metaphysics means meta, means beyond, and physics as in the physical plane. Divine metaphysics is all that, plus the full understanding that the core principle of all that is divinity. So that's the foundation. That's a principle of it all. And so in the study of these things, what I've, been playing with in my little sandbox
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
is that when we are born, most 99% of people choose an incarnation where we forget who we really are and where we really come from, as a necessary premise for our journey here, right? However, it seems that we're at a point in the unfolding where it would be really good if we could kind of turn it up a notch and do more remembering. So that's kind of my mission in this incarnation, is to focus on who cares to remember who we really are, where we really come from, and why it is we chose to come to Earth. Because there is a lot that's going on here that basically sucks and seems on the surface to be somewhat unnecessary suffering. And I realize that that's kind of like a value judgment on my part. You know, sucks.
Yeah.
Things that suck, they just plain suck. Oh. And I know that we have a choice. We can enjoy.
It doesn't have to be that way.
Exactly. It's there's suffering, and then there's needless suffering. It's like what's and we've all experienced that.
Yeah, if we could have access to food and to shelter and to clean water and to education and to some health, it's a lot better of a system.
Yeah. So the whole bodhisattva thing about helping where you can, because you can, and because you can't not. If you can make something better, you have to at least try to do that. So there's a couple things that I've tried to foist on the world and the ways that I've done that. So there's this series of books, the Divine Metaphysics series, Divine Metaphysics 101 through 107. Okay, Divine Metaphysics 101 is kind of like when I explain to people, I usually say it's kind of like the Reader's Digest version of what I was given to understand by the universe when I was going through the spiritual acceleration in the winter of 1993-94. So that's the first 70 pages is all that. My original words and my original paintings and photographs and stuff. And then the last 30 pages tells a story of 1999. That whole story I was telling you about, how I, went to be at the pyramids for the millennium. And I started to do my meditation, the four meditations within one, right? And, it culminated with me, my eyes closed, making this triangle over my head and then opening my eyes like this. That would be the end of the meditation, right? After standing on my head and all 180 conscious breaths and all this other stuff, right? And I've got my eyes closed and my triangle over my head and everything like that. And they're counting down to midnight. I mean, I didn't time it. The universe did it. And it was perfect timing, right?
So good.
That's the story that's told in the last 30 pages of Divine Metaphysics 101. 102 is I wrote 101 in the fall of 2007. 102 I wrote in 2010. I was in a hot spring in the Southern Sierra in the Kern Valley. I think it's called Sterling Hot Springs. Something said to go into this one pool that nobody went into because it had all these like green floaties in there. It's like, I was like, really? You want me to go in there, universe? And I was like, so I went in there and I submersed myself so that all that was above water was my mouth and my nose. Oh, wow. And within a minute, these words came into my mind: realizing natural wealth. And I was like, wow, that sounds like a book. What would be in that book? And then I saw what would be in that book. And that night I wrote that list down in my iPhone. And I said to a friend, if I have a place to plug in my computer, I can write that book in 3 weeks. The very next morning at 4 a.m, I got a text from a friend that lived in the OC. She said, I rented a house in Balboa Island for me and my daughter for the summer, but our plans have changed, but the rent's paid for 2 months. I moved in that afternoon, and 3 weeks later, the book was on Amazon.
Oh my God.
Wow.
And I really don't know what's in that book, because it just came so
Just
fast.
blacked out.
And then
Yeah.
moved. Then I moved on. You know, as you do.
As you do.
You know.
Yeah.
In 2015, something said to write something every day and post it on social media, right? So whatever came through that day, I would write and post on social media under the title of Absolute Truth, ?
Mm-hmm.
When I was going through the spiritual acceleration, one of the things I was given to understand was the works of Mary Baker Eddy and, Science and Health through the Scriptures. She's the founder of the Christian Science Church and whatnot.
Yep.
And I read her book in about a month or so while I was writing another book called The Book of Whispers, which is unpublished still. And
We'll just whisper about it.
yeah, please. And one of the principles that came through the reading of her work is the concept of infinite love, absolute truth, and everlasting immortal life.
Mm.
This project turned out to be a book. I did that, posting every day for 45 days. And then I took another 45 days to compile that into a book, original words and original photographs and paintings and stuff. 200-page book called Absolute Truth, ? Some of what the universe has given me to understand. Divine Metaphysics 103. Handbook of the Infinite and Immortal Children of the Light.
Mm.
So
You're a good titleist, man.
Yeah.
thank you very much. So that inspired me. As I was publishing that book, my father passed, who was like 86, veteran. Something said, if you took all this information and you put it into a story, it may be more accessible to some people. So that was the genesis of the first novel, which is called The Immortal. What is it, a year or two later, I did the same. I was inspired by the Absolute Truth book to do a year-long series. Compose 10 questions every day on divine metaphysics and post them on social media. And then every 90 days, I compiled them into a book. And so the first one is Immortality, Everlasting Immortal Life.
Mm-hmm.
The second one is Infinite Love. The third one is Divine Communion. And the fourth one is On the Path. So, and in between each one, I wrote a novel.
Because you didn't have enough to do, you decided to write a novel in the middle.
Now, this is what happens when you don't have TV and kids, and
Yes.
you can do all these things.
Yeah.
I got a story about that.
Okay.
So I'm at I'm at the first World Rainbow Gathering in Australia in 2000. And we're having this council, a vision council. And we've been having the council for about 3 weeks every day and sitting in this grove of these huge, beautiful eucalyptus trees. And this one day, there were 150 people in the circle. And we were trying to determine what is the universe, what is rainbow globally? Are we going to have another World Rainbow Gathering? When would we have it? It was the first. It wasn't like we had planned to do more. It was just like, what is this? In this one day, there's 150 people in this circle, and we pass a feather, and the feather was halfway across the circle from me, so it's like 75 people away, right? If everybody spoke for a minute, yeah, but some people hold forth. Like I have a tendency to hold forth, as you can probably tell. But this across the circle from me, there was a young man who had a baby on his shoulder, right? And I'd never seen him at the circle before, right? And he was standing just behind the circle, and the feather came to him, and he was like surprised because he just came to listen. He wasn't expecting to be able to speak, with a circle that big. It's just, it's unlikely. He said, "Could you hold that feather for me?" And the person said, "Sure." So they held the feather for him, and because he didn't want to take his hands off the baby, and he's like, "I have a lot to say. I don't want to wake the baby, so I'm going to trust that whatever I would say, the Spirit will say through someone in the circle." And pass the feather, right? And at that moment, I realized that's what I'm in that circle for. That's what
Yeah.
I'm here for, right? I'm not going to do that, but this is what I'm good at. This is
Yeah.
what I'm here to speak
That is so
Yeah.
good.
for
That's really
those
good.
that will
That is
never
so
make it
good.
to that circle in Australia underneath the
Yeah.
eucalyptus trees, you know?
Yeah. And
That's
some
good.
guys don't find a girl when they're 17 and get married and they're together for 32 years. And other guys do. So much respect for your journey.
Hey, man,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
I thought I was going to be you.
Well, in a way, you are. And I
You
am.
are. Yes,
I
you
know,
are.
but I thought I was going to be, you know, I fell in love the first time when I was 6 years old. Love at first sight. It was the first day of art class, and all the desks were set next to one another. They took us to the art room, and they said, pick a desk. And I went to pick a desk, and this kid I didn't even know was in my class stepped up to the desk at the same time. We looked at one another, and that was it. We knew everything at that moment, right? And we were, you know, energetically, emotionally attached to the hip for the next 3 weeks until her family moved.
That's incredible.
Yeah, her name was Dawn Ellaway.
Wow.
If you're out there,
Shout out to Dawn.
Dawn Ellaway.
Yeah.
And when she moved, I promised myself I'd try to find her when I grew up.
Wow.
You know?
And this episode comes out, and 2 weeks later, she reaches out, and it's
And
amazing.
then we're on Oprah. Right, yeah.
Or Jerry Springer, depends which way the
please,
episode
no,
goes.
Man, no.
Oh, I think that we could probably have
Yeah.
many more episodes.
Yeah.
Hear
Okay.
many
there's-
more David
There's no end to this
Alexander.
conversation.
Yes.
Let's continue this. Thank you so much for being here
You're
today.
welcome. Thanks for having me.
As we conclude our conversation with a ... to be continued for another time, leave our audience with, if there's one thing I want people to get from my work, it's this thing. What would that be for you?
God, being infinite conscious and infinite love, already knows everything there is to know. So whatever it is that you think that you need, it's already known.
Mm-hmm.
When you consider what you're dealing with here. And so then it's about how good are you at receiving the bounty that you already are presented with.
That's good.
So then, you know, where it's incumbent upon us, our walking meditation then becomes, you know, perfecting our reception.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Witnessing, bearing witness to what it is that we are being presented with.
Mm-hmm.
You know, making the most out of the feast.
That's good.
Thank you.
And he just drops the mic. Dude, you're amazing. Your website.
You're amazing.
Thank
You're
you.
amazing.
Your
You're
website
amazing.
is davidalexanderenglish.com.
Yeah.
That's
Or
how
daenglish.com, .english.com.
Or
And the
if you're
app,
hanging out down on Venice Boulevard,
Yeah.
you're around there.
if I'm around, if I'm in
Perfect.
town,
Yeah.
I'm used. I love to work there, and it's in a negative magnetic anomaly, so people usually feel a level of euphoria there. It's easier to be there than most other places, wherever you come from.
Yeah,
It's
and you're
usually-
on the beach. That helps too.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's negatively charged ions.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's good.
yeah.
That's
There's
good.
that. Get that working for us.
Yeah.
And the app.
Yeah, the app. Hopefully this month it'll be released. It's Daily, DAELY is the name of the app, and
good.
it's a little Buddha character with a heart
Ah.
is the logo and whatnot.
Nice.
And I'm really excited about it. We could talk about just the I Ching aspect of the daily oracle
Oh, I would love that.
thing. Yeah,
Because I've only gotten a little bit
it's
into
deep. I
Ching.
was studying it on the way over here.
Yeah.
You know, just it's so gratifying to have an idea. You know, the
Oh,
care
yeah.
and feeding of a good idea. It's just like it's almost as good as sex, right? Right?
Okay. Yeah.
Right?
Thanks for joining us here on Exploring the Human Journey. You can find us as a video on YouTube or listen to us as a podcast. You can also join in the conversation by following us on Facebook and Instagram. For more information, go to the website at exploringthehumanjourney.com.